Thank you, thank you. Good afternoon. You cannot imagine how delighted I am talking to you for many reasons. Number one, that you stayed, because usually an afternoon speaker on a Saturday meeting, by this time they're ready to take off. And here is this beautiful full house. So thank you for wanting to hear my story. I would like to acknowledge Mr. Porters, who found me and brought me here, and my two lovely hostesses, Mrs. Simpson and Mrs. Doyle, who are taking care of us as the best mothers you could imagine. So with that in mind, I would like to just tell you a little bit about my story, a little bit about history, a little bit about hatred and love, because it all intertwines. You know, some of you younger people my age have lived through the Second World War and are familiar with some of the atrocities that took place during the Nazi era. But I have noticed there are a lot of young people in the audience, which I thrive on, because my mission in life is, whatever the good Lord is keeping me to have, whatever few more years, whatever, my mission is to teach the children not to hate, to teach the children not to join any bigots, to teach the children tolerance. And if I can accomplish it, I am going to heaven direct. So with that in mind, I was introduced. My name is Magda Brown, and I was born in Hungary. Hungary, all of you know, is a lovely, lovely country. And my life as a youngster was equal to any of the children around here, happy-go-lucky child. And I have only one show and tell that I show to the audience. And this is my 8th grade graduation picture, which proves that fashion may have been different that many years ago. However, I look just the same. So what happens? I meant to say not now, but just the same as the children here. Okay, well, I'm forgiven for a little error. So, I just tried to prove a point that I wasn't any different. So what happens when the pendulum swings and from a happy-go-lucky lifestyle, tragic strikes? And here I have to give just a little bit of history to make you understand the progression of the tragedy. First of all, you are familiar with the name Hitler, who was a Nazi leader, and his ultimate desire was to eliminate the Jewish race from around the world, and his second desire was to have a perfect race of blonde, blue-eyed, most intelligent children. And with that in mind, he carried on his wishes almost the way he wanted it. So with this in mind, what did Hitler do? Once he came into power, he wanted space. He wanted race, he wanted space. In order to accomplish space, he decided on occupying many countries in Eastern Europe. And that took place in 1939 at the onset of the Second World War. So the Nazi army marches into Poland, the Eastern European countries, and their first job is to collect the Jewish people, and the killing machine begins. And all this is happening in a very systematic, perfectly coordinated order. So they go into these countries, they gather the people together, and they start concentrating them in ghettos and concentration camps. Now the reason I describe it this way, for you to understand that Hungary was different, because Hungary was an ally of Germany, and as such, they worked together. So there was no animosity between the two countries. So the Nazi regime stayed away from Hungary, which meant that our lives, compared to our fellow Jews in the other countries, were somewhat normal. Now don't understand it so that it was perfect. It was just better. And to describe it to you, while our fellow Jews were suffering in the other countries, we were still living in our own homes, and we were still able to go to our jobs and go to school and go on with our lives. However, very rapidly after 1939 on, anti-Jewish laws were created. And these were the follow-ups from the Nuremberg laws that took place in Germany in the 1930s, and it got translated into Hungarian. And just a few I'm going to explain to you to make you understand what these horrible laws were. For instance, if you were a farmer, you owned a large piece of property, the government came in and took it away. I mean, there was no business transaction like we are accustomed to in a normal life. They came in and decided that you own a big manufacturing place or whatever of a larger capacity. They took it away from you. No receipts, no money exchange, nothing. So you were no longer an owner of the property. And that could have gone back to 4 or 5 generations of ownership. Then came another law, which was, well, it was kind of sad for the young people, but the religions could not intermarry. So, well, they had to live with that. But then came a much more serious laws. And these were, some of them, where the Jewish professors, lawyers, newspapermen, theatrical producers, pharmacists, who were working in different positions were let go for absolutely no other reason that they were born Jewish. Whether they practiced Judaism, whether they didn't, it was irrelevant. The important thing was that they, on their birth certificate, it said Jewish, and therefore they could no longer practice in their respective fields. Now, you have to realize that unemployment was created because of all these job losses and so forth. So the Jewish community had to help one another and support these people. Then there was just one more I'm going to bring up, and that is the military. In Hungary, until about 1940, all young men at the age of 18, after they finished high school, would have to enter the military service. That was just a routine lifestyle. And the young men, whatever religion they were, they served together, and they fought for the country and protected the country as it should be. Well, this anti-Jewish law decided that the Jewish young man could no longer wear the country's uniform, could no longer bear arms. However, he would still have to be part of the military, but they created a separate Jewish division. So they had to prepare their luggage with their private clothing, wear their own clothes, and they had to wear a yellow band on their arm indicating that they are Jewish. And they were kind of imprisoned because first of all, they were treated very badly. They had to do the most menial jobs, from ditch digging to whatever bad jobs you can imagine they were doing. And the other thing was that, in a sense, they were already imprisoned. See, a normal soldier have furlough, can go home, visit the family, can go in the town and go to the movies or shopping or whatever on their free time. The Jewish boys could not leave the compound. So this is the establishment now with our young men. So they all have to enter and be under this service. So life is still going on. And there was one other nasty law that really affected me as a young girl. And that was the numerous clauses, which allowed only 1% of Jewish children entering higher education. And my grades were pretty good. I had a good grade average. I was fairly decent student, so there would have been no problem for me to go to higher education, but the 1%, somebody else beat me out of it, and that was my first very, very painful disappointment in life. Things were moving along, like I tell you, and then came March 19, 1944. Hitler decided that the Jewish solution, which he called the final solution, that was his slogan. The final solution meant the killing of all the Jews. So the final solution was not happening in Hungary. So he called over to his headquarters the regent of Hungary and asked that he should loan 100,000 Jews for forced labor to be sent to somewhere in Eastern European countries. So our leader agreed. Now remember, he was asked to loan the 100,000 people to help out in farm work or whatever. Well, that was lie number 77, and there are many, many more to come, because it didn't quite work out that way. So to give you a step-by-step situation of the unbelievable, and believe you me, I'm telling the truth. From March 19, 1944, the German army walks into Hungary. Not like a warfare where there's border guards and gunfights and protecting your country situation. None of that. The Hungarian military openly welcomes their German friends, and the Germans walk into Hungary and literally take over. And as they say, hell broke loose, because things got to be unbelievably bad. And everything was done up in a very, very systematic fashion. You see, you have to remember that in 5 years, from 1939 to 1944, they had ample time to practice their killing machine. So to tell you the killing machine onset of it, Hitler decided that there should be no mentally challenged children living. Now, I'm talking about his own German children. I'm not talking about foreigners. I'm not talking about Jews. I'm talking about German disabled children. So he got together with some doctors who followed his thinking or his leadership, and they gathered these mentally challenged children, and they told the parents that they're going to be in this clinic and they will be taken care of. Well, it didn't happen so. What has really happened, they put them into an enclosure and they gassed them to death. All the mentally challenged children. There are in the 75,000 categories, something along those lines, of human beings being killed of your own nationality. So this is how the gassing began, but it started with his own people. We are in Hungary now, and it is March 1944. And like I told you, in the 5 years' time, they learned all the systematically way of killing. And in 51 days, they were able to relocate 440,000 human beings. It's a mind-boggling figure. I mean, 440,000, 500,000 people to just physically move. I'm not talking about the emotional part of it here. I am talking about the physical, moving, coordinating, relocating people. But it was so scientifically created that what happened in one part of the country, it happened identically the other part. It was a master sheet, do this, do this, do this, and it was carried out. Why? Because the Hungarian military, the Hungarian police cooperated with them. And so the Germans didn't have to do much. They just gave the orders, and the Hungarian police was very gracious in cooperating. So what happens and how it's done? Well, I will give you a little bit of idea, because it's unbelievable. They come in March. In about 2 weeks' time, all of us are ordered to wear this Star of David, and a little fabric was already prepared by someone who knows where, had to be sewn onto our clothing, and we would not be allowed to leave the house without it. And ironically, even small children had to wear this badge. After this, maybe another 2 weeks' time, the directive comes that we have to move into a ghetto. Now, when I talk at school to the children, I have to kind of distinguish between your understanding of a ghetto and what a ghetto is in real life. Our understanding in America is that if an ethnic group decides to live in a community, it's a ghetto. But they certainly have total freedom to come and go, do whatever they want. However, in real life, it isn't quite so. So how was it all done? Beautifully. The directive comes that this group lives on the south side of town, and now they will be relocated to the north side because the government decides that the ghetto will be located in that area. And this side, they give a directive for, in 1 hour, the police escort will be there together. Now, here I always give a little thinking for the children. The mother tells you, go to your room and fill up a little grocery bag, because that's all you are allowed to take with. They told you to take some stuff with you that's good for 2-3 days. Those children could be 2, 3, 5, 7 years old. It really doesn't matter. We don't know how many children that mother has, which means she cannot spend time with each and every child, so they are on their own. Put stuff in your bag. So now they are gathered together. Remember, there are no more husbands around. All the men are taken away to this Jewish military place. So the woman is all alone with the children. So now the hour is up. They have to line up on the street. By the way, there's no such a thing as a car or bus or train transportation from this end to there. You just have to walk it, march it. So the police escorts you to the location on the north side. I happen to live on the north side. And what happened on the north side, the house I was living in was built by my grandfather about 40 years before that. And my mother and my brother and I were born there, so it was a comfortable house. We were 6 of us in this house, and it was fine. Now, these mass of people are coming from the south side, and they don't ask you, would you be so kind and let so-and-so move into your house? I mean, you know, we have, manners went out of fashion. There's no such thing anymore. So they just say, this many people will be in this house, period. So can you imagine a house that has been comfortable for 6 people, now we'll have to house 40 people. So you can imagine what a chaos that created. In that house, there are ample spaces for sleeping, and 1 bathroom, 1 toilet, 1 kitchen. But you have to do what you have to do. There's no ifs and buts, there's no other way. Now I have to throw in something here that is the truth, but I might as well say it. I was a spoiled brat. I was the youngest in the family, and I mean, I could have anything I wanted, and I summed it up. I was spoiled, which means that I had my own space. I had my own room. I had my own stuff. Now, all of a sudden, all these people are merging my stuff. And I'm altogether not even 17 years old. I'm not that smart. But you'd be surprised how fast you learn to share. There are no other ways of doing it. You have to share and you have to understand. Now remember, these 40 people were of all kinds of different personalities you could possibly imagine. It could be old, it could be young. It could be sick, it could be healthy. It could be nasty, irritable, or pleasant. I mean, all the personalities that God created us with, we had them. Now you are in a very limited space, and you better behave or else. There's no recourse. There's no other way of doing it. So how do we eat? How do we do things? Well, food was scarce. They gave us some rations. Now you have to remember that this is already 1944. The war is it's getting close to the end. The Allies are pretty close to landing in Normandy. I mean, we are pretty far up in the war years, so the food is very scarce. But in my particular house, people were a little bit luckier, because my father, being in the meat business, you know, in the olden days in Europe, they used to smoke meat and render fat and stuff like that to preserve for the winter without refrigeration. So we had quite a nice supply of smoked meat, so we would bring it down from the attic and feed the people. So we were sharing right away. This was one aspect of living in the ghetto, but there were many, many, many atrocities that is very hard to describe. For instance, the Hungarian Nazi Party was comprised of a bunch of young hoodlums, uneducated young hoodlums, who in my older years, when I think about it, I realized that they really didn't even know what they were doing, but they were paid off by the Nazis, and as such, they committed the most heinous crimes you can't even imagine. So for instance, they could come into the ghetto area. Now remember, we were still in our own homes, which meant that it still had our own belongings from years back, whether it had a nice painting, whether it had a nice carpet. I mean, it was there. They would come in, and they would just take it and walk out with it. Now here is the important point here. It's not that they stole. It's the fact that my generation goes back at least 5 generations back living in that area. We were very, very, very patriotic Hungarians. Matter of fact, we put Hungary before religion. I mean, that's how patriotic we were. So now, until that time, the police was protecting us. No more. When all this pilfering is taking place, the police looks the other way. We have no more protection. We are no longer the citizens. We are no longer the respected people in the community. It's just a transformation from one minute to the next of being dehumanized. I think that's the best way of describing it. So then came the police, and then came the legal robbing. This was, I call it the illegal robbing. Then came the legal robbing, and that was done very efficiently. You received a form, and you had to fill out your valuables in the house, and you had to turn it in. You had to report what you have in the house. All right? You have to do, that's the order. A couple of days later, the police comes in and just takes the stuff. First of all, they say, give me all your cash. Well, people, whatever cash they had, and you have to remember one other thing. Once we were locked up in the ghetto, you could no longer go to your jobs. You could no longer earn money. You could no longer go to a doctor. You could no longer go out of that enclosed area. So as such, whatever cash people had from before, we had to turn that in, had to turn in all our jewelry. Matter of fact, I remember them taking the golden band of my mother's wedding band of her hand that she had done for like 20 years, and so on. So they took away all the jewelry. Then if that wasn't enough, we had to turn in our radios, because the radio was the communication in those days, and we were not allowed to know what's going on in the world. Many other things, but I'm not going to emphasize anymore, but that gives you a picture of the legal robbery. Now, just to jump forward in my story, because I will tell more about that, but this money that they robbed from us will pay for the railroad to take us to our death. Okay? So keep that in mind. This is taking place. In the meantime, many, many, many atrocities are happening. a lot of beating, a lot of abuse, they report you for all kinds of invented crimes that you have never done. They accuse you, and you have no legal legs to stand on. I mean, there's nobody to protect you. So they find many ways of torturing you. But we are still kind of somewhat together. This lasts a little bit. Then comes the big one. The order comes that we are going to be relocated to another country because they need some help on their farms and manufacturing and whatever. But they guarantee us that the families will stay together. Well, we believe. We have no other choice. We're going to be relocated, so fine. So now everybody who was in the ghetto is allowed to take a little bag full, again, of personal belongings. By the way, children usually ask me, what did I put in? And I have no idea why, but I put in my favorite poetry book, among whatever clothing and so forth. But anyhow, the day comes when we are ready to be moved out of our home. Walk out of your home. Now picture your own house with all the stuff in it that you put in through your married life. And walk out. And never, ever see the contents of it again. It's just gone. So we are marched through town. And this had to be one of the most painful things for my father, because you see it in the program book, his business, and that happened to be on the main street of the city. And besides being a businessman, he was a philanthropist, and he was a very charitable individual. And he helped all religions. I mean, there was no distinction. You know, he was busy in the Jewish charities, but at the same time, he helped the city, and he contributed in many, many aspects of it. Now he's marching through town with his little bag, looking at his store that he really worked 6 days a week, very hard to make a living. And all this is somewhat understandable, but seeing people on the sidewalk snickering at you and dirty words slurred at you, that had to be the most horrible feeling. You see, if we were killers, if we were robbers, if we were bad people, I say, okay. But absolutely nothing else was against us except that God gave us the birthright of being Jewish. Nothing else. And this way we were led to our gallows. We marched through town, and at the other end of town was a brickyard. Now you wonder, why are they taking us to a brickyard? After all, a brickyard has absolutely nothing. I don't have to describe it. I mean, it has bricks. There's no toilet facilities, there's no kitchens, there's no beds, no nothing. Well, even that was scientifically figured out. And I'll tell you why. The railroad track was adjacent to the brickyard. And that was the mode to move the people out of the country. So at this brickyard, we stayed a couple of weeks. Food was very scarce. People were already overstressed, totally exhausted, sick, tired, depressed, anything you could imagine, and really not knowing what tomorrow brings. And if that's not enough, they were doing an awful lot of nasty things to people. And I just bring out one incident that I vividly remember. My mother had an aunt who was of some means. And this robbery police came in, and they knew about her wealth from before, which already she turned in. And they said, where is your wealth? She said, I gave you everything. I don't have anything. Where did you hide it? I didn't hide it anywhere. Anyhow, they took the dear lady out of the camp, and they tortured her to death, trying to find out where she hid her belongings. I mean, this is just one example of a brutality beyond imagination. So now comes the transports. And on my 17th birthday, on June 11th, we are herded into this kettle car. Now, all of you have seen kettle cars. You know the capacity of it, maybe big enough for like 20 people or 5 horses or something like that. They crowded in 80 people. Now, this is already spring, summer. It's getting warm in June. 80 people in this small enclosure, and they slam the doors on you, and you are standing up. There is no way of moving or doing anything. You're squished together. There's a tiny window, not bigger than our computer screen, and even that had a barbed wire across it. That's the only light to distance. And now we are locked up in here. And by this time we are pretty much in a shock. We just really don't know what is happening. And in order to allow my parents to sit on the ground, I stood for 3 solid days, just shifting from 1 inch this way and 1 inch that way. Food, we had very little bit in our sack, but nobody really wanted to eat. I think the worst of all the torture on this trip that stands out in my mind was thirst. You cannot imagine how it is to be without water for 3 days. And I always tell the young students that during the summer, when they have nowhere to go and they're just lounging around, go without water for 2 hours, not 3 days, 2 hours, and get the feel of that horrible thirst. I mean, our lips were dry, and what happens is you cannot think of anything else. Your mind is totally focusing on, could I have a drink of water? The train is moving along. We have no idea where we're going. We just got to be relocated somewhere else. And, you know, between Hungary and Czechoslovakia and Poland, there is the Carpathian mountain range, which is absolutely gorgeous. This is June, the lush greenery. And that particular day, I ended up by the window. I must have been shoved in that direction. And I'm looking out, and on the mountainside, I see a shepherd walking his flock. And I think to myself, how come he is there and I'm here? I was a good girl. I haven't done anything bad. At that point, I thought that the entire world was incarcerated, that everybody was in these cattle cars. So that picture lives with me forever, because it was just so close and so remote and so unexplainable. So now the train is going on and on and on, and it stops, and we finally get to a destination. The door swings open, and some strange-looking men in striped uniform, talking a strange language, but somehow or another you understand sign language after a while, and they keep shoving you out of this cattle car. However, they point to our little bit of belonging from home, the last little something. Leave it here. You'll get it later. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we never, ever saw that stuff again. That remained right there. So now we are shoved out of this cattle car, and here I have to explain something to you to fully understand. We have young people, we have old people, sick people in these cars. It has no steps to step down. It is about this high, like this table, which means that the poor old people had to jump down. The young people could jump down. That's not an issue. The young people who were some crippled, I mean, it was a horrendous sight. And here are a mass of people. Now, I'm going to give you a little bit of statistics here to kind of understand what this is. You see, it would not have been feasible to send one cattle car on a long journey like this. So they coupled together as many as 50 of these cars. Now do your mathematics. And 50 times 80, that mushrooms into several thousand people. And the sea of people are merging out of these cars. This is what they call the ramp. And as we are standing or being just out of the car, my auntie touches me and said, hold on to your mother so you don't lose each other among all these people, which I thought was an excellent advice, except it backfired. You see, by this time they separate the men into different units, and this is the last time I see my father, and now I'm holding on to my mother, and we are walking forward, and then, again sign language, stop. 5 or 6 Nazi officers are facing us, so naturally we understand stop is stop. One Nazi officer steps forward, lifts up his index finger and points at you this way. So you go that way. I mean, it doesn't need super intelligence to do that. Points to my mother this way. So we are separated, and I kind of wave at her and I say, Mother, I'll see you later. Unfortunately, this was the last time I ever saw my beautiful young mother. And I will tell you details what happened to the people who went to the other side. So now I am pushed here, and by this time, we are no longer human beings. We are robots. We are zombies. We are nobodies. Everything is a motion, a movement, a push, a shove. And everything goes in succession. And hurry, hurry, hurry. Everything is in a hurry. So we are pushed from this area into a room. Now we have to totally disrobe, fold our clothes nicely, put it on the floor that we're going to retrieve it. Well, that was another lie. We never ever saw anything of our last stitch of clothing that we brought from home. So we are shoved further, and we are told that we're going to have a shower. Well, we looked forward to that after a 3 days journey. So they take you into this room, and like we have these beautiful lights on the ceiling, there they had about 50 shower heads coming out of the ceiling. But you see, the shower, what we use here, and the shower, what we had there, is like day and night. If I were to measure you, the amount of water that my body received could not be more than 2 cupfuls. It was just a trickle of water. No soap, no towel, nothing. So now comes the other tragedy of tragedies. Now remember, I am 17 years old, and all young girls are spending a lot of time with their hair. I don't have to emphasize that. And we got escorted into this other area, and we see some girls coming at us, and they are screaming. I mean, beyond crying, screaming. And they look so funny. And we kind of looked at them and said, yes, they do look funny. Well, they shaved our hair, they shaved all our body hair, and if that wasn't bad enough, they sprayed disinfectants on the freshly shaven skin. So you can well imagine how that feels. But what was ironic about when we saw these girls coming toward us, we started laughing. I mean, it's one of those silly laughs. You didn't realize that 5 minutes from that point on, you will be in the identical position. So from here on comes the wardrobe. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is an experience to behold. There was this mountain of clothing of all kinds. A person is behind it, and we are standing stark naked, and they throw a garment at you. They never look at you. Are you small? Are you short? Skinny, fat, young, old, whatever? Nothing. They just throw this garment at you, and I ended up with a long slip. No bras, no panties, no shoes. So then later on they gave us these Dutch flip-flops, you know, wooden sandals, which is horrible. So all this ordeal is taking place, but everything is systematically done, you know, very military fashion in that sense. Now they put us down to sleep. Here again, I have to emphasize, you know, that you have to put your thinking into a different position. It's not like going to bed in your bed. It was a totally empty room. Wooden floor, absolutely nothing in it. Now the room would hold approximately 200 people, but they scientifically managed to put in 500. How did they do it? Very cleverly. They laid you down like sardines in the can. And then we had these wooden flip-flops, put it under our neck, that was our pillow, and the body heat next to you was your blanket. That was your night. Bathroom facilities were again different than what we are accustomed to. They are called latrines. Latrines were giant holes dug in the yard, and a wooden plank across it carved out seats, and that's where you went. No curtains, no windows, no privacy, no paper, no soap, no water. That's how was the latrine. And ironically, they wouldn't even let us go there during the night. So they had a bucket put in the corner of the room, and I don't think I have to be more explicit about what happens to that many people. The night somehow we survived because we were totally exhausted, and then came the morning. At the crack of dawn, there were some guards out. Here again, I tell the children, it's not like you get up in the morning, you brush your teeth and comb your hair and do all the normal things that your mother taught you. None of that. As you wore in that crumpled up clothing, out you go, and now comes the counting. Now to this day, I don't know why they had to count us, but they kept counting us. And the counting could last a half hour, it could last an hour, it could go in any direction. You had nothing to do. So there had to be 5 abreast lined up, and they would count you. There was no such a thing as calculators, just 1, 2, 3, 4. Now the reason I'm so explicit about this counting area, that we had nowhere to go, so they would just keep repeatedly counting us, and heaven forbid if the count was off, then they would start again. Later on, when we were there for some time, they had, some of our colleagues were getting sick. But you see, you have to be dead, but you had to vacate the room. So in order to do that, for these sick people to be counted, we would be 2 and 2, and the sick one would be in the middle. And then we would hold on that sick person, literally supporting from both sides, so the head could be counted. Then they could collapse afterwards. Excuse me. So these things went on. Now comes our gourmet breakfast. And that is something to behold. Because the first day, they brought this kettle of horrible, horrible smelling green liquid. Oh, by the way, we didn't have utensils either. I mean, I just want you to know that it was not what we are accustomed to. So the utensil was 1 mug for 5 people. So they gave us this horrendous green liquid, and on the first day, we were literally gagging. I mean, just couldn't swallow it. So the people who have been there for a longer period of time, they kept begging for it. Little did we realize that this will be our steady diet, so we better eat it. So now we got this bucket of thing, and then the 5 of us. Number 2, number 3, number 4, and 5 were counting how many swallows number 1 took. So there will be enough left for number 5, because there were no such things as seconds. So this was the menu of the day. And life there was a mystery. How about that for an expression? We had no idea where we are until we found out that this was Auschwitz in Poland, and this was one of the largest concentration camps in the European continent. As we were there for a couple of days, we kept asking the people who have been there for a longer period, Do you know where our parents are? The people who went that away. And they looked at us, and inevitably, the hand went up and pointed to the 5 chimneys and said, "That is where your family is." We could not believe it. We came from a civilized country. This is the 20th century. There's no such a thing as burning people alive. Unfortunately, we found out the reality of it at a later time. So now I'm going to give you a little more description of where we actually were. Auschwitz had a sub-camp called Birkenau. That was a transitory camp to the killing machine. Therefore, I do not have a tattoo on my arm because we were all destined to be killed. And to explain how this machinery worked, about a few months before they came into Hungary, five Polish villages were leveled off surrounding Auschwitz to create the camp Birkenau, which housed 200,000 people. And this camp was strictly as a transitory camp to the crematorium. They have designed this so cleverly. See, until then, the transport trains would be coming into Auschwitz, and there they would locate people in different areas. When they knew that this many, 500,000 people were arriving, they went ahead and they built an additional ramp surrounding this camp Birkenau. So when the cars were coming in from the other country, they could go direct, deposit the people, and within a few feet away were the gas chambers and the crematoriums. And how cleverly they did it, because they could accommodate just so many thousands of people in a day. That was a killing machine. So the people who were old people, children who were destined to be killed, they put them in a meadow. There's a meadow adjacent to the chimneys. And they said, "Oh, you can rest now, you're going to have a shower, everything will be fine." So they even created a beautiful shower room. They gave them towels just to camouflage. It's all psychological warfare because it made the people calm. Nobody resisted. After all, we're going to have a shower, we're going to bathe, and then we'll go on to whatever else we have to do. So there is no fighting, there is no everything. Thousands of people are handled by a couple of Nazis. It is mind-boggling. So now how was the killing done? The killing done was, there was this giant shower room, and they herded a group of people in there, locked the doors, and everybody's anticipating water. 2 Nazi officers were stationed on the outside of the wall. They had gas masks on, and they threw Cyclone B gas into the shower chambers, and from the body heat, these pellets explode and create a gas and suffocates the people. Once these poor souls were killed, by slave laborers were taken out from here and literally put into these ovens and burned alive, and their ashes are thrown all over the area. At this point, I usually quote our General Eisenhower, because every so often people have the audacity to deny that all these things have happened. No other part in history have been so documented as the Second World War and the Holocaust itself. But there are still people who come up with denials. So I have no way of fighting the whole world, but I have you, and I tell you what General Eisenhower has said when he liberated one of the camps and what he has seen. He told his soldiers take as many photographs as you can so the world can see what Nazi brutality has done. So even though I know this quotation by heart, but I read it, after all, if you don't believe me, you should believe the President of the United States. And this is what he said. I have never felt able to describe my emotional reaction when I first came face to face with indisputable evidence of Nazi brutality and ruthless disregard of every shred of decency. I visited every nook and cranny of the camp because I felt it my duty to be in a position from then on to testify at first hand about these things in case there ever grew up at home the belief or assumption that the stories of Nazi brutality were just propaganda. I think I made my point. The rest is up to you to carry the message that it was very true. So life went on in Birkenau, such as it was, and we were doing nothing. We were not allowed to stay in the room. We had to just roam around this courtyard, and there were women soldiers guarding us with guard dogs. Then they had soldiers every so many feet on a tower, had guns aimed at us. And then we were completely surrounded by electrified fence. Now where in heaven's name could we have escaped to? But they kept counting us and watching us and so forth. So life went on. It was very bad. Heaven forbid you should become ill, because that was your end. There was no such thing as medicine. There was no such thing as doctoring. The minute you were ill, you were killed. So now came another situation that here again I had to qualify the explanation, the word, the meaning of the word, and that is selection. Well, we very well know in our language what selection means, except over there it meant something totally different. Selection meant that a group of prisoners were parading in this courtyard in front of a group of Nazi officers, and they were kind of selecting you. And there were two columns, but we didn't know which is which, for what purpose. One column was that the crematoriums were free to kill some more people. The other column was allocated for people destined to go and do some slave labor somewhere. Well, evidently I ended up in the so-called lucky ones, and I was transported out of Birkenau with 1,000 Hungarian Jewish women. We were sent to Germany in a town called Stadt Allendorf, which is in the general vicinity of Marburg, Kassel, Frankfurt am Main, and so on. This was Germany's largest ammunition factory. It was built in 1933, and it employed political prisoners and other undesirables, but not Jewish people. Didn't have any Jewish people until we got there. Nor did they ever have women employed. We were the first women, the first Jewish people. And ironically, most of the 1,000 of us, 900 just came out of school, or we were still in school, we were young people. We have never seen a factory, nor have we ever worked in a factory, but you'd be surprised how fast one can learn. So we were sent into this ammunition factory, and our job was to fill poisonous liquid material into bombs. They were manufacturing bombs and rockets. Now here again, I run comparison. In America, when you work in a factory, they have a law called OSHA, which means that you have to wear protective garments. We had none. Absolutely none. The same uniform what they gave us, that was our protective garment. So what happens when the poison starts affecting your body? About 4 months into us working there, we looked at one another, and by this time our hair was starting to grow out about crew cut size, And the ones who had black hair now had orange hair. Our faces were lemon yellow, and our lips absolutely dark purple. See, the poison started affecting our body. And if the war would have not come to an end in the near future, I wouldn't have the pleasure of talking to you. So we were getting pretty sick by that time. And life in this camp was, it was bad. But it cannot compare with Birkenau, because now we were laborers and we got a little better food. But we didn't know what's going on around the world. We had no idea how the war is progressing. We only heard the Allied aeroplanes flying over us, and we were praying that maybe they will just bomb us and that will be the end. There were many, many, many atrocities happening here too. And this was kind of a, I don't know, call it revenge. I don't even know how to put it. But every time the Allies were bombing the guards' homes, they took it out on us like it was our fault. So can you imagine in the bitter winter, with the little, we had a tiny, a very thin coat, and that was our only one. By the way, I never ever want to be cold again, because that was a horrible feeling too. And for our feet, we used to steal the paper bags from the poison powder and wrap it around our legs. So that was our stockings. So anyhow, we would come home from work. It's about maybe a 5, 6, maybe 10 kilometer walk time, totally exhausted, and they would punish us. So how? We would stand in the courtyard, and for punishment, they would make us kneel down on pebbles. Well, ladies and gentlemen, on a naked skin, on a tired body, kneeling on the pebbles for an hour is no joy. And there were other atrocities. One of my dear friends was so hungry that she stole a potato, and unfortunately she was caught, and they put her in a rat-infested root cellar, and poor darling went out of her mind. So there were many, many, many things, and life went on until March, towards the end of the March, when our commandant, the Nazi officer, received a directive that we have to evacuate the camp and march on foot to Buchenwald, which was maybe 300 kilometers from this location. So we got on march. Now here again, we were traveling on the highway, and the highway could be, the daily travel could be as much as 50 kilometers. Very little food, and some of the people were getting very tired, very old, very aching, and they could barely walk, but they had to, otherwise they would shoot us. And for night, we had no hotel to sleep in, but we slept in the ditches. And we did this for 3 solid days. And then we have noticed that some of the guards were escaping. You know, there were just not as many guards around us as earlier. So a group of us decided that our life is really worth nothing. I mean, you know, we didn't know what's what, where are we going. And in the middle of the night, we found a farm area, and we saw a barn in the distance. And one by one, we crawled and we hid in the barn. And we hid in the barn for like 24 hours. And then we look out, and there were 2 young men coming towards us in a strange uniform. Well, we knew that wasn't a Nazi uniform, so we didn't have to worry about that. But it turned out these were 2 American soldiers. The Americans already occupied the area, and evidently they have noticed cluster of women here and there. So the leader must have sent out scouts to find us, and that is how I was liberated. So I usually stop at this point, but I have 2 important messages, mostly for the young people. The young people, I just want you to know that next to your health, the most important commodity is freedom. And once you lose it, you really, really, truly miss it. And the other one, which I touched upon earlier, as far as standing up to the deniers. Believe you me, I am telling you the truth. And if you don't believe me, go on Google and there's everything visible. So thank you for listening, and I will welcome some questions I hope that you will ask. Okay, come right here.
Magda, we're going to limit it to 2 questions today,
Go
and
ahead.
we'll take more questions tomorrow.
Okay,
2 questions.
2 questions. I guess we're running out of time.
Dear Marta, thank you for your presentation. I have a question. What, in your opinion, was the reasons why the Germans, they hate you so much, the Jewish nation? Because I'm coming from Poland, and we have a lot of millions, couple of millions Jewish people in Poland, and I have spoken with people who remember before war and time before war. We have not been Nazi, but there was a lot of enmity between Polish and Jewish, and I remember people were telling me that the Jewish people told Polish that they are goys, means servants, so there was a lot of tension, and I don't really believe that there was this story so polarized, that there was innocent Jewish community and bad Nazis. You know, there was more reasons why things happen, and I want you to try to explain this.
The reasons. Well, okay, where do I begin? Where do I begin? First of all, as far as the Polish people themselves, they suffered immensely. And I know it because there were Polish people in the camp with us. They were not Jewish. And they were in concentration camps as well. As far as the Polish Catholic Jewish relationship was very close, because a lot of Polish Catholic people hid Jewish children. Okay? As far as anti-Semitism, it is rampant in Europe. And I can tell you that what's going on in Germany, and there's anti-Semitism in Poland, in Hungary as well. There are young people coming up, and they really don't know what anti-Semitism is, but it's a new fad. So as far as the olden days, you had to live it to fully understand the thinking. I have not lived in Poland. I cannot speak for the relationship. There were good relationships. There were not good relationships. And I'll tell you where it was bad relationship. I have heard that some of the Polish Jewish people who went back to Poland after the Holocaust, the local people kicked them out, and they created pogroms, and they didn't want them back. So there are, you know, many aspects of every story. That's the best way I can answer you.
My second question is about the forgiveness, because because
Okay.
I can give you example. Poland, we fight with Germans to the blood.
Okay,
And there was
forgiveness.
we
I
lost
can-
more people than the Jewish. During the war, we lost a couple of million more Polish people than the Holocaust of Jew. And today, between Germany and Poland, we have no enmity. We have open borders. We have freedom of transfer between countries. We have a lot of exchange in culture and business. New generation born, we don't forgot about the war, but we forgiven each other. But when I look on the Israel today and what you are doing with Lebanon, there is a hate,
I'm not going
hate,
to go into
and hate.
any
And
politics.
I'm just questioning,
I am
what
not-
about the forgiveness in the Jewish culture?
Let me answer you, may I?
Okay.
Okay. You're talking about forgiveness. I have forgiven, and I'll tell you where. The German Nazis of the 1940s, during my youth, I can't really 100% forgive, because what you have heard earlier, what I went through, how all the people were lost. But I have the best relationship of German young people your age. And I will tell in more details tomorrow my love for my Gregor and Tobias and all the German children. So yes, I have forgiven. We do have a good relationship. So I know about that too. So you have to understand it works.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, yes.
Magda, in the first place, I would just like to thank you for what you have related. I completely relate with that. When I read a book, A Town Called Alice, by Neville Shute, I saw what torture it was, and I read this during my school days. But today I see the personification of that torture, what you have reported. Now my question is, okay, I've also heard that you have forgiven and you have survived, which means you are standing here today, and we are very happy to have your presence. Tell me, when you were liberated, how did you connect with your family? Are you with any of the members of your family today?
Yes, my brother is alive. I have lost survived. Let me put it this way. Out of the extended family of 70, 6 of us survived. I multiply this in the whole cities and the whole country and the whole Jewish nation. Yeah. So that was a great thing. As far as what happened after the war, if I have the pleasure of having your company tomorrow,
yes,
I will talk about that, what it is to rejoin society from nothing, when you have nowhere to go, nothing to do. I usually say one thing for all of you to remember. From one day to the next, I lost my home, my valuables.
Yes.
I lost my country. I became a slave. I became an orphan, a displaced person, and nowhere to go and nothing to have. So I said an awful lot, didn't I?
Yes.
So I will elaborate on it tomorrow to make you, give you a full picture of how it is that I can stand here and tell you about it. It's a long road.
Yeah, I know, and you must be living it practically every day or night, or have you really learned to forget it?
I am grateful for every day. I tell you, when I was first invited a few months back, I was doubtful of accepting because I lived from one day to the next. So
yeah.
God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you.